Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. Today, we have a very special guest. Karys Rhea is a producer at the Epoch Times. She has a show that she produces, and she does lots of other things. So check her out on her X. Got mixed up with Twitter. So, Karys, it's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you, Ariel. It's great to be here.
So, first of all, we're meeting in person because you're in Israel, so that's cool. We usually do these types of things from far because people aren't coming too much to Israel. Um, we're going to talk about, first of all, an article that you wrote that's going to be published soon about the woke right.
Right.
So usually when we talk about woke, we're talking about leftists. We saw the protests on campuses this year, really came to the forefront. Queers for Palestine, all these, the intersectional coalition, what's happening all over in America. And I think the election showed that Americans have had enough of the woke left. And so, Karys, maybe take us through about who the woke right is, and why they're so dangerous to people who support Donald Trump and his agenda.
Right. Well, the woke right is a term that admittedly I thought I coined. This was before October 7th when this group kind of became increasingly relevant and people started noticing. I actually first picked up on this in 2022 as it related to Candace Owens. I wrote a long piece about her in White Rose magazine about how in her defense of Kanye West, who had outed himself at that time as a pathological anti-Semite, she was actually turning woke. She was embracing the same type of tactics that the woke left embraces, such as falling back on identity politics, embracing a victimhood status, things of this nature. So I saw the signs with her early on. And then I thought I coined this term, and then lo and behold, I found out that a whole bunch of other people were using it. Catherine Brodsky had written about it. Konstantin Kisin had written about
James
it.
Lindsay, who we're
James
going to
Lindsay
have
had
on the
talked
show
about it.
later this week.
Great. He's wonderful. And we all kind of separately had taken note of a new phenomenon that was developing within the America First, or MAGA, pro-Trump conservative movement. And what was percolating were these different voices that don't even necessarily like each other. Sometimes there's infighting among them, and they come from different camps. Some of them are libertarians like Dave Smith, Scott Horton. Some of them are groypers like Nick Fuentes, Jake Shields. We have people that are from the health freedom movement like Stu Peters. We have Christian nationalists like Candace Owens and Lauren Chen. And of course, the godhead of the woke right, Tucker Carlson, who himself is a paleo-conservative.
What does it mean, by the way, from all the things in the article, one thing I didn't understand, what does it mean to be a paleo-conservative?
A paleo-conservative is somebody who essentially embraces the Pat Buchanan philosophy of conservatism. It involves a foreign policy that is non-interventionist, strictly isolationist. And as most of us know, Pat Buchanan was somewhat of a Jew hater.
Yes. An Israel hater for
to
sure.
put it crudely. Certainly an Israel hater.
Yes.
So hatred of Israel is a focus of paleo-conservatism, as we've seen from Tucker since he left Fox. So this is a very loose cohort of characters. And yet they are bonded by an outspoken declaration of being America first, pro-Trump. And yet what we have seen from these people is they are anything but. And it's not just being anti-Semitic or being anti-Zionist. That's certainly a staple of these folks, but they also have embraced woke tactics such as identity politics, victimhood status. Most of them are proud Christians, and we can get into that, how they use Christianity not as not in the sense of being humble before God, but actually as an arrogant cudgel to stoke division, and very much as an identity of victimhood. And then also things like embracing revisionist history, taking down sacred notions or figures that are really responsible for not necessarily Western civilization, but certainly for the post-World War II unipolar order in which America is the shining city on the hill, as they say, the global superpower. Right. And so they embrace ideas and narratives and histories that seek to destroy this notion, reverse it, tear it down. And then other things that enjoin them with the woke left is their politics on foreign policy, their blind isolationism, as we talked about, as opposed to the America First policy of foreign restraint,
Hmm.
right? Being more selective. They have in a very extremist anti-war blind isolationism that is essentially a form of appeasement in complete denial about our foreign enemies. And they envision a world, they want a world in which America is completely withdrawn, focused on domestic policy, which sounds really great until you realize that if we take it to the extreme that they want it to be taken to, we would see a world stage that was ruled by China, Russia, Iran, BRICS, uh, and they are living in a fantasy world, just like the woke left does. This
Yeah.
idea of utopia, where these ideological enemies would somehow never come after us.
And Karys, I just want to say one thing about why it's, as you're talking, I think about it. In the Black Lives Matter, when the riots happened in 2020, around when it was the COVID thing. So one of the things that we saw was the tearing down of statues. And the reason I think behind that, and it was explicitly said, was we need to tear down the system. The system itself is a bad system. It's evil. We don't need to make it better. It can't be saved.
Right.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, for example, says it all the time. America is racist to its core. It always will be racist. We have no reason to save anything. The only solution is to tear it down and build something else back up. And that's what we saw, tearing down Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and all these great American founding fathers and heroes and war heroes and people who we look at it at history like it's today without the context of where we were. And so one of the things that we're now seeing on the woke right is, for example, the hatred of Churchill,
Mm-hmm.
who, with all his flaws, I think until 5 minutes ago, it was the whole West was saying Churchill was someone who, as a figure, saved the West
Right.
in front of Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And yet Tucker brings on this historian. He's not an historian, a
Right.
blogger
Right.
who claims he's an historian, and
Right.
who numerous historians like Victor Davis Hanson and Neil Ferguson have totally debunked what he said. Brings him on, nods along the whole conversation where he's denigrating the West, saying that Churchill was the real villain of
Right.
World War II, maybe not Hitler,
Right.
explaining that the Nazis weren't going to, they had too many prisoners, they didn't have food, so they just starved everyone because they didn't have food. They just decided to starve. It was a mistake. It wasn't on purpose. So he's exonerating the Nazis in a sense and blaming Churchill for everything that happened. And so I think a lot of it is similar. The
Right.
tearing down of the systems, of our history, of our shared, like shared ideals for at least the left has sort of what they want to do. The woke right seems they don't have anything they want to come instead. They just want to tear everything down.
I think they would be. That's really interesting. I think
This episode is brought to you by Ayn Rand Center Israel. We meet every alternate Friday to study and discuss the philosophy of Ayn Rand, author of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. The topics range from ethics to politics, reason versus faith, aesthetics, psychology, and much, much more. This is the only place in Israel where Ayn Rand's unique philosophy is accessible to you, and you're welcome to come learn all about it. It's a great opportunity to learn and meet really interesting people. Attendance is free, and first-timers get a free book. We meet every alternate Friday at the WeWork in Serona Market, and we like to keep the intellectual discussion going afterwards with some great food and drinks. Click the link for more info on Ayn Rand Center Israel.
there might be some disagreement amongst them of what they would see happen, right? Because they're not a really united
Right.
formal movement and they each have different visions. I do think many of them would want to see some sort of Christian nationalist, maybe, government. But then, like Tucker Carlson, you really have no idea because he's lately been endorsing all these like technocratic enviro communists on his show, like
Yes.
people who actually want to see like the state ruling everything,
And we're gonna get to
and
that soon.
globalist,
Yeah.
one world government. So who knows what these people actually want? But what is clear, and it's not just Churchill. They've done the same thing with Abraham Lincoln,
Yes,
with
Reagan.
Martin Luther King, and let's be clear here, because I am an America First Trumper. Okay, you can see on my shirt. I'm a big fan. Okay, and I am not saying here that there is. Look, I work for the Epoch Times. I know about the illusion of consensus and how there's so many mainstream narratives that we just accept that are actually false. So there is nothing wrong with examining the past, including these sacred heroes, so to speak, and maybe pointing out mistakes that they made along the way or flaws, like you said, that they have. But that is not what the woke right is
Right.
doing. They are villainizing them, like you said. They are demonizing them. They are turning history upside down in much the same way that the woke does.
Right. And we could also,
The
one
woke left.
thing is the woke left. One thing that we can say is that it's curious. For example, we're picking on Tucker because he's the most influential.
hmm
He has millions of followers that went with him when he left Fox. He's making lots of money from his following, and good for him. But he is the most influential. That's why we're talking about him. And I think he thinks there's an audience for this, which shows that it is a problem, or that it is something that we need to tackle. And one of the things that's curious for me is that he had a guy, I think pretty much like not too far after October 7th, a priest from Bethlehem who is like a total anti-Israel person, who made up stories, who didn't give the context, which I think it's so obvious that, as someone who did reserves in Bethlehem when I was in the army, and it's the Christians all fled Bethlehem. Not because of the Jews, because of the radical Islamists, because of the terrorist organizations and sympathizers who made it unlivable for most Christians. And then you have a pastor from there talking, and he doesn't mention any of that. Oh, and
Right.
Tucker nods along. Then he has this historian that we just mentioned. Now he has this guy, like you mentioned,
Jeffrey
Jeffrey
Sachs.
Sachs, who works for the Communist Party, if I'm not mistaken.
The Chinese
The
Communist
Chinese
Party. He's a
Communist Party.
senior researcher at one of the state institutions.
Yes.
He is a talking head on all, CCP state media. He's the foremost anti-American, non-Chinese speaking talking head.
Exactly.
He goes on, Chinese state TV just to bash America and talk about how all the geopolitical problems in the world are America's fault. He works for the UN doing the 2030 sustainability development goals that will essentially usher in a one world technocratic government filled with digital IDs and a digital currency.
So are you saying that he's not America first, really?
He is the opposite of America first.
Exactly.
He is the opposite, and he's not shy about that. You just have to go do a Google search of this guy and you'll hear the things that he says. He blamed COVID on America, not the CCP. And look, he does have a few heterodox views that align with the America First movement, but this is the problem with Tucker: is he picks out these views, and then his audience don't know they don't know who these people are. So, like, for example, this pastor from Bethlehem, right? Tucker usually. Oh, and let's be clear before we get into that. The woke right, this wing of the America First movement, they would be largely irrelevant and really not a threat if not for Tucker
Right.
Carlson.
He elevates them in the masses.
Exactly. And that's why we're talking about this.
Exactly.
If not for Tucker Carlson, they'd really be relegated
And
to the
Candace
fringes.
maybe a little bit, but
I don't
not,
know.
not
I
the
don't.
same.
Candace doesn't have the ear of Donald Trump.
Right.
Candace isn't close with Donald Trump Jr. like Tucker Carlson is. Tucker Carlson is really the link between the rich and the powerful and the influential, and these people that would, if not for the internet, not really have so much of a place in polite society. But let's go back to this pastor. Tucker usually does some little introductions, some little monologues before he introduces a guest, and you would think in this introduction that he would have informed his viewers that even though this whole interview is about Israel's alleged mistreatment of Christians, he's not interviewing a Christian that lives in Israel. He's interviewing, like you said, a pastor that lives in Bethlehem, which is under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority. Right? You'd think that with there's hundreds of thousands of Christians here, right? You'd think he could have found one here in Israel
I could
to
give
interview.
him some.
Yeah.
I could give him.
And so he doesn't even choose to interview somebody who's living in Israel. I wrote a whole article about this in Tablet with Dumasani Washington. And this pastor comes on and starts railing about how Israel persecutes Christians. Doesn't mention that, as we all know, Israel is the one place in the Middle East where the Christian population is growing, that Christians flee from the surrounding areas, including Judea and Samaria. to come to America to Israel because of the persecution they're facing by the Arabs, by the Muslims. Okay. And not only that, Christians are among the most successful minorities here in Israel, even outpacing Jews by certain metrics. So it's
Education and stuff like that. Yes.
absolutely. And so this is another area in which the woke right is indistinguishable from the woke left. Just like the woke left finds racism where it is not and ignores it where it is, right? They throw out the word racist like it's a pronoun, you know what I mean? Like they'll label anything and everyone racist,
The second
regardless for
language,
its
yeah.
merits, right? So the woke right finds Christian persecution where it is not and completely ignores it where it is. Christians are a persecuted people today. And not just in the Middle East where and in Africa where there
China.
are routine slaughters of Christians and disappearances and rape and kidnap, but also in Canada where churches are regularly burned and defaced. It's just become such a fact of life now. Do you ever hear Tucker Carlson talking about that, or Candace Owens or Lauren Chen or Stu Peters or Kim Iverson? Never. Because they are not really interested in the truth, in the facts. They are interested in a form of identity politics in which they are interested in only criticizing the West, Israel, America, for what they see as some sort of, sinful philosophy or policy that
Right.
they say needs to change.
And one thing in the Jeffrey Sachs interview, which it's unbelievable. So we're seeing right up to north from where we are, Syria totally disintegrating into sects. The Christians in Syria are basically non-existent because they all ran away because of persecution.
Right.
I'm in touch with people who are
There
Kurds.
was over 1 million Christians in Syria at the beginning of the
Right.
Civil War. Now there's what,
I'm not sure, but there's a lot
300,000, I
less,
think?
right? And I'm in touch with people who are Kurds in Syria. They're very worried that they will be slaughtered next by the Turkish-backed forces because Erdogan hates the Kurds. The Druze are asking to be annexed by Israel into Israel because they're so worried. And yet, Jeffrey Sachs says, this is coming out the week when this is happening. He says, Bashar Assad was in Syria before Obama decided to attack it. It was a normal place. It was I forgot the exact wording, but it was regular. Everything was good. And then America just decided to attack. Like, you don't have to like Obama. And I didn't like Obama and I disagree with a lot of his policies. But the real villain in what happened in Syria was the person who we're now also finding out what he was doing in his prisons.
Oh my
with the
God.
torture of children and women.
Just today. Now I haven't looked this up, so this is coming from secondhand information, but I just left my my apartment where I'm staying. My parents are here, and my father, just as I was running out the door, he said, "Oh my gosh!" I said, "What?" And he said, "I'm just reading now that they just discovered a mass grave in Syria with 100,000 people in it."
Mm.
Bashar al-Assad and his father have been torturing people
and
for
torturing Palestinians
decades.
also, and all these minorities, and not even minorities, Christians. Like I said, if you care about Christianity and Christians, Bashar Assad was not your friend. I mean, he did, in a way, sort of, because he was such a dictator, people were scared of slaughtering each other, but he was slaughtering them for them. And also now, since what's happening now is that you have jihadists coming in, and and so this guy Jeffrey Sachs is blaming Israel for
Israel.
being against Christians and being against Syria. We have enough problems here. We don't need we're not looking to destabilize Syria. I think we can. What happened was that Hezbollah was weakened, and so they were helping Syria. But I don't think Israel should be blamed for that on just an objective level. And one thing that I did want to ask you is the conspiracy nature of this woke right, because it seems to me that one of the things that you can just in general say all these different types of people that subscribe to this is that they're very big on conspiracies,
Right.
and also on the just asking questions part.
Right.
So what happens is he'll platform an anti-Semite or a anti-American person, or a Jeffrey Sachs who works for the Communist Party in China, and he'll say, I don't agree with, like, after he'll get attacked, and I'll say, I didn't necessarily agree. I was just asking questions. Why would you be against me asking the questions? The problem is that when you ask questions without pushback, without saying, wait,
Mhm.
how can you say Bashar Assad was a good person? Or how can you say that until 2013, Syria was this great place?
Mhm.
Doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Instead, he's just nodding along and asking leading questions that are easy. Like, there's no pushback.
Right. Absolutely. And that's a good point about the conspiracies. And I think what happened since COVID is so many people on the right, including myself, became black pilled a little bit because we saw how during the pandemic, everything that we were observing and speaking out about was called a
Yes.
conspiracy. And so many of those things turned out to be true, whether it was the
The
lab
lockdowns.
leak origin, right,
Yeah.
from China, or the Russiagate scandal, Hunter Biden's laptop. There's so many conspiracies, Biden being mentally unfit. Every time conservatives tried to point out, show the evidence for these scandals,
Yes.
the media would shut us down and say that we were conspiracy theorists. So I understand that, when that happens, when that becomes a pattern, it's easy for people to become very cynical and bitter and black pilled, as they say, and kind of seeing conspiracies everywhere. But the problem with that is if you really embrace the idea of global conspiracy as your starting point, then eventually you get to the Holocaust.
And they're already doing it.
And they've already
The
done that.
Groypers for sure.
Absolutely.
I think you could see that if anyone's on X now, it's very good what Elon Musk did. It's and it does come with dangers. In a sense, I was interviewing Sean McGuire from Sequoia, who's very pro-Israel, billionaire. He sold his company for billions of dollars. He's friends with Elon. When Elon bought Twitter, he was one of the financiers that helped him put up the money. And I asked him what he's Jewish, and he came out very pro-Israel. And the Groypers went after him.
Yeah.
And I said, do you agree with Elon's approach to free speech and everything? He's very pro, but he said it comes with dangers because they were going after him personally, sending him death threats and all this stuff. So one of the things that I think is good is that you get to see
Sure.
how these people think, because in the
Of course,
past,
they're
you wouldn't
exposed.
know. And so it's so scary to know that there's thousands, and I'm not sure, like, it seems to me, maybe even millions
These
of people.
people have millions of followers.
Yes, but I'm not sure that I'm a follower too, just because I want to know what they're
Yeah.
saying. I don't know how many of them
Are hate
actually
following,
subscribe
right.
to their ideas, but the fact is there's for sure tens of thousands of people in America who are Holocaust
No, much more.
deniers,
I think much more than that.
but at the minimum,
At the minimum, yeah.
and that are
Oh, I guess in America, yeah, maybe, but
in America,
yeah.
Holocaust deniers, Jew haters, like in the worst way
Right.
possible.
Right,
Just
and because Jew hatred and anti-Zionism is such a staple of the woke right, often their conspiracies
Yes.
involve Zionists or Jews because that forms the basis of anti-Semitism to begin with.
Yeah.
So in this movement, Jews or Zionists have been blamed for 9/11, October 7th, the Armenian genocide, the assassination of JFK, the 9/11, of course. Did I already
You
mention
said that
that? I
already.
sent that. That's like the obvious one, because people on the left
World
do
War
that too.
II in general,
World War
because
II in
Churchill was pushed by
general,
the Zionists.
exactly. The sinking of Titanic, the sinking of the Ocean Gate submersible. I mean, we're 14 million of us compared to over 1 billion Christians and over 1 billion Muslims, and yet Dan Bilzerian or whatever his name is, that gambler who's a member of the woke right who has millions of followers, says that Jewish supremacy is the biggest threat in the world. Right?
Yes.
It's so textbook, this cabal of these small people pulling the strings, controlling everything. I mean, and one thing that you just said there. Oh, I don't even remember. I lost track. Anyway.
Okay. One of the things that I did notice.
Oh, I remember what it was.
Okay, so start the sentence over.
Okay, and I remember another thing you said, and you were talking about the Jeffrey Sachs interview and Syria. Jeffrey Sachs blames not only America, but Israel for what's going on right
Yes,
now,
yes.
right? He bashes Netanyahu, saying Netanyahu has all these ideas for a greater Israel. You think Tucker knows anything about what a greater Israel means? Do you think Tucker has even looked on a map and looked at the size of Israel compared to its neighbors, right? You zoom out on a map, you can't even see Israel because it's a tiny dot, And he's talking about Jeffrey Sachs. I think he was talking about like Netanyahu going in and occupying, whatever, wherever we're in the buffer zone now in the northern Syria, does not say one word about Turkey's occupation of Syria for how long? I mean,
Or Cyprus.
it's
Turkey has been
oh,
there's
well,
the
Cyprus is that's a whole
it,
other thing. I mean, but even just looking at Syria, right?
yeah.
Looking at the territory within Syria that hasn't been under Assad's jurisdiction. And I mean, the Turks are if we really
It's
want to
their
talk about it,
playground.
it's exactly it's their
They
playground
have
here.
no respect for borders, for anything. And also one of the things that Douglas Murray talks about the woke left, at least until now, was the fact that they blame themselves, their countries, their
Mm, right,
nationalities for everything.
right.
So you'll see that Tucker goes to Russia. Look, like you said, Russiagate was a big. We know now it was a conspiracy. We all said this is ridiculous, and then we were right. People who said this is stupid, this is a conspiracy to get Trump, this is to stop him from implementing his agenda. It was true,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that Putin is the good guy here.
Right.
So you're taking one step forward. You're saying
Right.
Hillary Clinton made up a story with the FBI,
Right.
Comey, whatever, that Trump was a Russian puppet. Therefore,
Right.
Putin's good.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. So
Well,
he goes to
yeah.
Russia, and let me just
Yeah, yeah.
finish the thought. He goes to Russia and he says, the grocery prices are very, very cheap here.
Yeah.
And in America, everything's more expensive.
Right.
He totally just
The
disregards the
subways are
fact.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But also he disregards the fact that Russians make a lot less money. So even if it's cheaper, it's much more expensive for them. The fact that you could say that Russian standard of living is higher or comparable to America when you're only in Moscow, and disregarding like all these villages that don't have electricity or running water, and like southern Russia or somewhere near Siberia also, where there's like, we have friends that came from there. They hardly had running water half the year. It's freezing cold, so the heating is very rare, and they live miserable lives, a lot of these people. And America is a great place. I love America. I grew up in America. I love Israel too. I'm now an Israeli. I was in the army here, but America is a great place. The fact that you're always finding that other places are better, and that America is at root of all the problems in the world, and that yet you call yourself America first, is so weird, and
Right.
almost like it's like diabolical. It's like almost a mental illness in a way.
It's completely antithetical to the nationalism at the heart of America First. I mean, when when Candace Owens gets on Twitter the other day and talks about how like all the jihadis that people are worried about are secretly CIA agents, you have to wonder whether she's that stupid or she has an agenda. I mean, and when it comes to Russia, what you see is the woke right is so superficial when it comes to looking outside of our borders. They're very good at identifying the threats to the American Constitution, to our culture from within America. Right? They talk they talk about the threat of these gender activists
Yes.
and all these, alphabet soup philosophies, DEI and CRT and ESG. And yet they cannot connect the dots when they're looking outward into the international geopolitical landscape, right? So they will, pay lip service to Putin because he's anti-woke, right? But they don't care that his allies are, China and Iran, right? Look, the woke right, one of the things that makes them anti-American, just like the woke left, is they actually embrace and endorse people. They have guests on their shows that support America's ideological enemies. We've
Yes.
seen this yesterday with Jeffrey Sachs, who is a pro-CCP propagandist. We've seen this with people like Douglas McGregor, or we see this when Dave Smith is tweeting out, guys, Iran is not our enemy, despite the fact that there are death to America chants.
Great Satan.
Like there are just regular death to America chants in the streets, of Iran by the Khomeini stooges and from the Khomeini camp, and then you have like the IRGC, who's now charged with trying on multiple occasions to assassinate
The
President
leader of
Trump
America First.
and Biden. But
Yeah.
sure, Iran's not our enemy. Like they're not listening to our enemies when they say we are America's enemies. They are in willful, deliberate denial because they don't actually support
America.
a strong and successful America. And they say they're just like the woke left, we're just anti-war. We're just non-interventionists. We just don't want to be wasting taxpayer money abroad. I'm all of those things. I get it. And this is one of the reasons why I'm America first, because Trump has embraced you know, a much different approach to the foreign arena than his predecessors. I'm no neoconservative, okay? But there is a difference between Trump's foreign restraint and the woke right's blind isolationism.
Yes. And also with President Trump, which is very interesting, everybody likes to say, and it's true, that in his first term, there were no new wars in America. America
Absolutely.
did not. But Trump did kill Soleimani. He did attack Syria when they crossed the red line, 49, I think, missiles into Syria. I think he spoke about it in his press conference a few days ago. And the thing is that the reason why he did this, and the reason why he's now tweeting in Truth Social about if they don't release the hostages, all hell will happen. An isolationist does not talk like that.
Right.
Because Trump knows that on the world stage, people need to be scared of you.
Right.
And if they know
Absolutely.
that just your starting point is you'll never hit back, you'll never take
Right.
action, then no one will be scared of you. And that is a recipe for more war. That is a recipe for more Americans dying in the end. And so it's not either it's not a binary choice where either you're for war everywhere
Right.
and just going into Libya and all these other places and just killing everyone and guns blazing, or nothing, or trying to be like an autarkic place where you're just going to put the borders up and nothing's going to happen and everything's going to be
Right.
fine, which is weird. It doesn't work like that anymore. We're in a global world. America needs to be strong because
It's the same utopia mindset as the left has.
exactly. And so therefore President Trump, I think on just a gut level, understands this.
Mhm.
And so I'm not worried about President Trump's term. I think it's going to be a great term, and that'll be our next topic. But I am worried that after President Trump is here for 4 years. Hopefully it'll be great. There won't be a COVID like there was last time that made it very difficult at the end. But after he finishes, will the woke right, are they strong? Are they like, how big are they? Will they be able to sort of be a vocal support? Like, will they have influence in the next
Right.
administration?
When I'm asked questions about the future, I usually don't answer them because I'm terrible with speculation. I'm usually wrong. So I can just outline what I see happening now. And like I said, I don't think these people would pose a threat if not for Tucker Carlson. But as long as Tucker Carlson has the ear of President Trump and Donald Trump Jr., I think that these people are only going to continue to gather more followers and shape public opinion. So I don't think that the problem right now is certainly not government. We've seen with Trump's appointments, none
Yes.
of the people he has been appointing hold any of these views, okay? In fact, there's been news that said that Tucker tried really hard to keep President Trump from appointing Rubio, because according to the woke right, Rubio is an Israel first neoconservative, and he failed, okay? So, but that doesn't mean that these people don't have influence in the public arena. And the more hearts and minds that they change,
Yes.
the more threatening these people will become. So, what needs to happen? And I don't. It doesn't seem like it will be, because they, the rich and the powerful and the influential have shown no signs that they actually understand this. But what really needs to happen is those people in positions of power, they need to reject Tucker Carlson. They need to reject the woke right. They need to explain to the world that these people are operating under the guise of being American patriots, but actually they stand for everything that the left stands for. And they are free to we want to hear their opinions. Like you said, we want to hear the Jew haters' opinions. We want to know who
Yes.
these people are. But that doesn't mean that they're welcome in our movement. And it's not about just having different opinions. It's about having different values. And they do not share our values. They should go hang out with the left. They already do. They're already friends with Glenn Greenwald. He's a regular guest
Yes.
on their show. There's no more Chomsky. He's a Chomsky acolyte through and through. He's always been a leftist. He's not shy about that. Okay. They should go hang
And
out with
by
the
the way,
people that
it's
they're already endorsing.
yeah, and by the way, it's fine, I think, to talk to Glenn Greenwald even in a debate
Of
forum
course.
or whatever.
And he has a lot of very well-founded opinions.
Yes, and what I think we're saying is that we're not taking the approach of canceling someone
No.
or anything like that. It's important to have conversations and to give our opinions with them and explain and try to debate and change hearts and minds. What is true is what you're saying is, I think, is that we need to put the wall between us and them and explain why they're wrong,
Right.
why they shouldn't be listened to on the sense of shaping the movement,
Right.
shaping the administration's policies.
Exactly.
So I think
Exactly.
that's where
They're not spokespeople for the America First movement, even though they claim to be.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So now let's talk about President Trump's new term. Like you said, his appointments are, I think, across the board amazing.
Mhm.
Matt Gaetz, I didn't like, but he's not there now, so everything's okay. Pam Bondi's amazing, who he appointed instead of him. I think she's going to pass pretty easily. I think the two appointments that seem to me, just for looking from afar, that might be in trouble is Tulsi and RFK. I think Pete Hegseth is going to be.
You think so?
I think
I think Pete will face more of a challenge than RFK and Tulsi. You could be right. I could be wrong. Again, I'm terrible at speculation, but just judging from like the media's, they've been on RFK and Tulsi for like a long time, but like most recently, after Pete Hegseth was appointed, they just, came on him like a
Yes,
pack of wolves.
but think about it this way. I think that I think on most of these, all the Democrats will vote against it. And so the nominees. And so maybe John Fetterman, who's become an amazing
I
person.
think there are some Democrats who will vote for RFK.
Maybe, but the problem is that a lot of Republicans might not.
That's true.
So I think a nominee needs to get the majority of the Republicans. Like, he needs to get at least, he could lose 2 or 3, but that's it.
Right.
And so Pete Hegseth, if he gets Jody Ernst, then he'll make it. I think that's unless something new comes out or whatever, I think he's going to be fine. RFK might lose a lot of Republican support, and also Tulsi, people like Lindsey Graham and all these types of people who have in the past said things about her and things like that. Also, the reason why Matt Gaetz wasn't going to make it wasn't only because of his problems with the ethics committee. It was also because he said so many things against the senators who were supposed to approve him. And so I think also RFK said things in the past, so they're going to ask him about it and the hearings. But besides the personnel, what we can learn is that the general direction shows that President Trump is going in a good direction. The people he appointed is not people to the left was saying he was going to destroy everything and was going to go there and put his opponents in jail. And now we see that he wants America to succeed. We saw in the press conference, he wants good things for America, which is, people on the left are surprised by this. They can't believe it that he's becoming more popular as I think
globally he is. Everyone's falling in line.
Everyone's coming. Everyone's talking to him. He invited President Xi to the inauguration. I don't think it ever happened that other foreign leaders came to inaugurations of American presidents. Are you hearing from your leftist, if you have leftist friends, who they're surprised?
I do have leftist friends, but we stay away from these topics usually. I've been surprised. I've been surprised learning about when I read the media and I see how quickly the world is falling in line. Even
Yes.
somebody like, David Lammy, who's suddenly like, "Oh, I am inviting Trump to, whatever." And 3 years ago or whatever, he had this tweet that's like, "If Trump gets elected, I will, whatever." I mean, I don't know. It's hilarious just looking at all these people who made such threatening comments and declarations about, the
And the
world
new
ending if Trump
governor of Canada, just
oh my God,
the
Trudeau,
Canadian
who
state.
might
Yeah.
resign because of Trump's tariffs. I mean, it's amazing what is happening. It's amazing. Canada has turned into a police state.
Yes.
My father is Canadian and my whole family lives there. And it's so disgusting what has happened to that country since COVID under Trudeau. And now, just because Trump is threatening that those 25% tariffs, you have all these ministers resigning, and Trudeau is basically like in a situation where he's like, "Oh shoot, like I don't think I can,
Yeah.
be the leader anymore of this country." So it's really remarkable before inauguration, just what has happened, and it's exactly what you said. It's because people are scared because they know that Trump means
Yes,
business.
exactly.
Okay, and I think that when the woke right complains, as they do all the time, about war hawks and warmongering, I think it's curious how they will ignore, because they claim to be pro-Trump, they ignore the threats that
Yes.
Trump is making towards Iran and towards China, for example, that are the same types of threats that somebody like Lindsey Graham makes.
Exactly.
And yet Lindsey Graham, to the woke right,
They hate it.
is the most irredeemable, diabolical, war-obsessed neoconservative that could ever exist. Okay. Same thing with yesterday with Jeffrey Sachs. He comes on and he's talking about, Israel's, advances and, and their occupation of the Golan Heights and stuff like that. It's like, well, who
Donald Trump.
recognized the Golan Heights as Israeli territory? Donald
Yes.
Trump. But the woke right, and look, sometimes before Trump got elected, the woke right actually kind of showed their true colors a little bit, because some of them started criticizing Trump, like Lauren Chen, who then we found out was a paid Russian
Yes.
Russian pawn who's now disappeared from the face of the earth. We haven't
Isn't
seen
she
her
indicted or something?
face.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a federal charge against her for taking money from the Russian government. And people like this were criticizing Trump. And you're like, wait, I thought these people were MAGA America first, But now that Trump's been elected, I think these people are kind of hush-hush. They're not going to be criticizing Trump like they were anymore. But it's funny because they're criticizing people, labeling them Zionists, neocons, war hawks, warmongers, always labels just like the left does. But not Trump,
Yes.
even though he's saying a lot of the same things and advocating for a lot of the same policies.
Yes, and wait, one of the things that I remember what I want to say. One of the things that is interesting, I was talking to Professor Neil Ferguson, that I asked him if he ever saw a president that still has not taken office. Joe Biden is still the president
Right.
now. No one knows what he does anymore. He's totally like, he goes to Angola and falls asleep. And right now, no one knows where he is,
Yeah.
what he's doing. He might not even be alive. I don't know what he's doing.
Right. He's probably at a Taylor Swift concert
Yeah.
with Trudeau.
Exactly. I think he's probably sleeping or something. And the president-elect is really being treated as if he is the president by the
true.
world. He goes. France does cathedral they opened that burnt down the Notre Dame Cathedral.
Oh, right.
And they don't invite, or maybe they do, they invite the president. He doesn't come. He sends his wife.
Uh-huh.
And they invite the president-elect, like instead of the
Right.
president of the United States.
Right.
And first of all, Jill Biden, I think she really voted for Trump. She loves
That's
him.
the joke, right? I know. I remember she came out of the voting booth
With the
wearing
red dress.
and everybody was like,
No, but also in France, she was like looking at him in such a awestruck
Was she?
way. And then Trump used the picture to sell his fragrance.
Oh,
Said, this is such a good fragrance, even the haters love you.
that's so
And
funny.
there's a picture of him. It's pretty
Right.
cool.
No, there's no doubt that the Bidens are the big winners in this election.
Yes. I think also Joe can now say, when historically looking back, if I was there,
Right.
could always claim he would be
Of course.
Trump. And also,
Vindicates him.
he was the one that, when he was being pushed out, he said, Kamala, according behind the scenes, she's not going, she has no chance.
Yeah.
And they pushed
never
him
did.
out. and they put her in, and now he feels vindicated, even though he probably would have lost also. But not
Right.
probably, I think for sure he would have
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah.
But I think in a way, and there's a good chance I think they voted for Trump. I know it's a joke, but why not?
Yeah, why not?
His wife hates Kamala.
Yeah.
She can't even look at her.
Mhm.
But I asked him, Professor Ferguson, did he ever see this type of thing ever in the history of the United States of America? He's a historian, one of the best in the world. And he said, never was there such a thing. He
Right.
can't think of any time
Right.
when there was a president that was so incapacitated on the world mindset.
Right.
No one is looking at Joe Biden as if he's the president right
Right.
now.
Right. It's amazing. And even just looking at the anticipation about Trump's appointments, right? Like, when has the world or even American citizens really cared at all about the president's appointments in terms of like the public arena? Obviously the insiders are going to care, but this time around, and I think largely because of how Trump speaks directly to the people through social media and everything like
Yeah.
that, it's like every time he announces somebody, everybody's like, who's going to be? It's like we're watching the Oscars, like, and the winner
It's a
is,
reality show.
it's like an award show, right? Where he's announcing the winners, and to me that just seems so unprecedented. I don't remember anything
Yeah.
like that happening, and I think it's because people understand what the stakes are here, right? And they understand how much the American bureaucracy had run amok of the needs of the American people. And so the people that Trump is appointing, these positions in the past, these figures are really the people who led America astray. And so we need people in these positions to set us on the right track, to gut our massive, federal agencies that do nothing but give, millions and tens of millions of dollars in grants,
Yeah.
and who make their own decisions and enforce their own policies as opposed to the will of Congress and the president. And all the people that Trump has appointed, which are former leftists like R&K, it's a unity
Tulsi.
ticket, right? These people, unlike the woke right, regardless of whether they're left or right, they share our values. They understand what has happened in our government to create so much crisis in America, whether it's education, right? With our Americans having some of the lowest rates in literacy and reading comprehension, right? To the chronic disease epidemic that's facing our kids, right? Because of big pharma and the food industry, the processed food industry, whether it's the lack of an industrial policy, understanding what it means to bring our manufacturing back to the States and creating a stronger middle class and not be reliant on China, not just for our textiles, but for our medicine.
Yeah.
80% of our medicine comes from China. I mean, the people that Trump has appointed, they understand all this. And they understand that all of those things need to change in order to course correct history and get us back to what our founders envisioned for our
And
country.
one of the people that is really on the forefront of getting the bureaucracy back to where it needs to be and taking care of what we call now the deep state is Kash Patel, which Trump is appointing to be the new FBI director. The former FBI director has announced that he's resigning, I think because he understood that Trump would fire him. And you know Kash very well. You worked with him on his show, I think, in the past.
Yeah. I mean, I know him well in a professional capacity.
Yeah.
I was his producer, one of his producers.
So what can you tell us about him?
Yeah, he had a show on Epoch Times for a while, and I was one of his two producers for, I think it was maybe about a year. It was great because I learned so much from Kash about the deep state, about the way that our federal agencies essentially assume their own agenda and carry that out, how they've betrayed the American people in order to focus solely on their, elitist desires of getting Trump and keeping their jobs because they know he's a threat to the system and the bureaucracy. So I learned a lot from Kash, and I was ecstatic when I heard that he was appointed to be FBI director. At first, I thought he was going to get attorney general because he's a lawyer. I mean, he's done, and talk about somebody who shares the same values. I mean, Kash, really, he was a counterterrorism prosecutor and a public defender. He understands the threats that we're facing from countries such as Iran, and I think he's going to be a very difficult. It's going to be a difficult confirmation.
Yes.
He's one of those people that has really not been afraid to call out at every step of the way the federal government and the federal bureaucracy. Everything that Cash has said from the very beginning about Russiagate, from the moment that he, co-authored the memo, worked on the Nunes memo with Devin Nunes, to everything he said about January 6th. He has been completely vindicated.
Yes.
But there's a lot of people who are angry because he implicated a lot of people in calling out their lies. So I think he's probably very busy right now
Convincing the senators and
preparing
meeting
for
them.
what this confirmation
Yeah.
is going to hold. And if he can get through, which I my gut instinct is that everybody will, but again, I'm not good with, predictions.
And also
but
with Cash, we saw that a lot of senators already said they're going to support him because they know him when he was working on the committee with Nunes. He was
Oh, yeah?
working, like Lindsey Graham said, he's going to support
That's great.
him. And all these senators that you would think would have a lot of questions
Oh, that's
about
good to
him
hear. That's good to hear.
so we'll see. But
Yeah.
it looks like he has support from people who might have been questionable.
That's wonderful to hear.
But do you think the left is saying that he's dangerous because in his book, he had a list of people that are the deep state
Right.
and that he wanted to, I don't know, not hurt them, but like arrest them and stuff like that. So saying he's going to be chasing all these people all over the
Right.
place and just arresting people like Hillary Clinton in his book and Liz
Right.
Cheney. Is there any, like, it seems crazy that people would even think that.
Mhm.
Like, even if you thought, and I think it's patently true that people, when the Hillary campaign, the deep state or people within the bureaucracy were working to help Hillary get elected and to hamstring President Trump once he was elected.
Right.
It's obvious.
Right. Of course.
But now we're 8 years after that.
Right.
I think like President Trump said, his success will be his victory. It will be his revenge.
It's really interesting, and it's a really good question to raise. The idea of holding people accountable for what they did in the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Everything from the January 6th stuff to the Hunter Biden stuff to
Russiagate.
Russiagate, all that stuff. These people need to be held accountable. But how much do we want to throw our resources to relitigating the past as opposed to moving forward? Look, Cash is going to be carrying out the president's vision, right? And Trump has indicated that he's more interested in moving forward than relitigating the past. That has me a little bit uneasy because that makes me worry that there will be no accountability, even for stuff with COVID, right? I mean, there's just the way our government, globally, the way governments handled COVID was such an atrocity and such an affront to not just civil liberties, but the health of citizens and the development of children. And it scares me that nobody will be held accountable. I think that's a possibility. I hope it's not. No one knows the future. I would hope that Cash is able to strike some sort of balance, right? Where, he really prioritizes the people who really
The main
played central
characters.
roles,
Yeah.
right? In setting America off track, and those people can finally be held to account. But I think that probably Trump is also right that largely the American people want to be
People want normalcy.
they
I
want
think
normalcy.
the weird thing about
and
it
they
is
care about being able to put food on their table
Exactly.
again and being able to, have groceries be an affordable price. And they want their kids to be able to go to public school again without worrying about indoctrination. And, and I think these are probably the things that Americans care more
And
about.
Karys, the weird thing is that Donald Trump in 2020 was considered the disruptor, the person who wasn't, the normal candidate. And Joe Biden said, I'm going to bring back normalcy. In this election, Donald Trump was the back to normalcy candidate.
Right.
He was the moderate in almost everything that he took. He took the position that mainstream America was taking, meaning, unlike, for example, one of the things that, just to close off, because it is interesting, we could talk for hours, but one of the things, the New York Times, after the election results came in, they did an expose about what ads, one of the things they talked about, what ad the Trump campaign saw worked the best. The best ad was, she cares about they, them, Donald Trump cares about you.
I
And
love that.
changed minds.
I love that.
They changed and they were putting it on Super Bowl
Right.
and in football games all over the place and in hockey and
Yeah.
baseball games.
I think some of the amazing ads that came out in support of Trump were not even officially part of the Trump
Right.
campaign. A lot of
Super
them were.
PACs.
A lot of them also were. Nicole Shanahan was if it was RFK.
Yeah.
She put out amazing ads, and I'm not sure if that was one of hers. I think it might
No,
have
that
been.
was the actual Trump campaign.
Oh, that was the actual Trump
And
campaign.
the reason why I'm bringing it up is because what does that ad? And they said that was the ad of all the campaign, all the candidates that made the most difference in the research that was done post-campaign.
Interesting.
And the reason is, I think, that's just my opinion, that Americans want to get back to normalcy.
Yeah.
They don't want a candidate, they don't want a president that says we're going to do sex change for people in prison.
Right.
For illegal aliens in prison.
Right.
They don't
on
want
our
to
dime.
exactly.
Yeah.
They don't want a president that allows millions of people in illegally. They don't want a president
Right.
that puts women in with men in sports.
Right.
They want normalcy.
Yeah.
They want people
Common
to just
sense,
live.
as JD Vance says.
Exactly. And so Donald Trump was that candidate. And Democrats always try to say, if you remember, he's just weird about JD.
I remember that whole campaign. He's weird, yeah.
They
That's
are
so
the
funny.
weird ones.
Yeah.
Americans, I think, understand that all the things that we just mentioned, they are the weird ones.
Right.
And just closing
Well,
out,
Democrats are great at gaslighting and
Exactly.
projecting everything that they're doing onto Republicans.
and the woke right, if they don't stop, they will make the Republicans weird too. And that will be
It's so true.
problematic.
It's so true.
Yes. So, Karys, it was a pleasure talking to you, Karys Rhea. I think the woke right, the issue is going to be with us for a long time. This fight for the soul of the Republican Party, a little bit like the fight with the old guard, the Republicans of the old guard with the Trumpers.
Right.
It's going to be the next fight within the party and within the right wing of American politics. And I really think that it's important for people like you. I'm not in America, but people like you and people who are normal. Like we just said, normal. Americans want normal. And the only way for Republicans to win going forward, for the MAGA movement to be successful in the long run, is for the normalcy to preserve. And people like Tucker are promoting not normal stuff. And so I thank you so much for working hard. And you're going to be attacked for these kinds of stuff. And so people like you are brave. And I thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Western Spirit podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. See you next time.